Give us your
Sure,
sense
David.
about what
Thank you.
happened yesterday. I mean, we know some of the events building up to this, but what was the TikTok? What actually happened? As I understand it, neither side came back with anything new. Is that right?
We were really pretty far apart, and I'm not sure the top line is the best measure of that. I think there are two qualitative differences that were really the biggest impediment. One was the scope of this, right? I mean, from the very beginning, Republican negotiators have insisted that where there is an overlap, where there is a bipartisan consensus that we can move forward on, is physical infrastructure. The platforms and systems we use to move goods and services and people in our economy. Everybody understands that term. And it's roads and bridges and airports and ports and that sort of thing. So first, that was our idea of what should be included. The president wanted something much broader than that, to include things like school constructions and renovations and incentives for electric vehicle purchases and things that we don't consider to be infrastructure. So that was one pretty significant divide. The second one is how to pay for this. We said from the very beginning, we think the 2017 tax reform was enormously constructive. It gave us, before the pandemic hit, the best economy in 50 years. It was at least a major contributing factor to that. And to undo all that and raise taxes is just not something we're going to do. Instead, we should repurpose some of the many hundreds of billions of dollars from bills that we've passed over the last year that haven't been spent yet. Let's use that money. It didn't turn out to be necessary for COVID. It didn't turn out to be necessary to make state governments whole. They had a record year of revenue. It didn't turn out to be necessary to get an economic recovery underway. The economy is recovering. So let's use it for this infrastructure purpose. And the president never was willing to embrace that idea. So I think those two, the scope and how we pay for it, were the two reasons that the president decided to walk away from Republican negotiators.
So, Senator Toomey, I must say, at the beginning of this negotiation, I think many of us understood there was that gap on the scope as well as how you pay for it. And now they've broken down. We still have the same gap. That sounds to me like what we used to call in law school a true conflict. Does that indicate we're not going to get? You just can't get there from here in terms of a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure?
Well, except that the president doesn't have the votes to do it his way. So he can try, he can keep trying, but, and as you know, there is a bipartisan group that is working on another approach, and maybe they'll find a way to bridge this gap. But, you know, to get to 10 Republican senators to join with the Democrats, I think it's going to be very hard to get an agreement to, you know, undo the 2017 tax reform.
How do you think the American people, and let's be frank, it's Bloomberg, the business community is going to regard this? Because we hear from people on both sides of the aisle, we really want infrastructure. A lot of people across the country believe we need real investment in infrastructure. Define it however you want. And yet Washington doesn't seem to be able to get it done. What does it tell us about our government if we can't get something done that we all agree we should do?
Well, you know, we've gotten an awful lot done that we thought was necessary. Last year, we passed 5 major pieces of legislation authorizing and appropriating and setting up programs amounting to literally trillions and trillions of dollars to respond to COVID. We did all kinds of unprecedented measures to accelerate the delivery of this vaccine to the American people. So I think, in fairness, we got a tremendous amount accomplished when we really had to. We already spend probably over $100 billion a year on physical infrastructure, and the question is, how much more do we want to spend? Some of us think that really to just print this money, as some of our Democratic colleagues would advocate, is a bad idea. To raise taxes to do it, we think is a bad idea. So look, some Americans will agree with us, and some will agree that it's okay to, you know, raise taxes, but I think the best thing for our economy is to force an agreement where we repurpose some of this money that hasn't been spent yet.